This is Victorian lit, The Heavenly Twins, Evadne Part 1. Evadne was a good girl who fit society's expectations of what a girl and daughter should be. She was well-mannered, she was quiet, she would listen to you intently, and she was good with kids. But one of the things that made Evadne a little bit peculiar is that she had a great natural intellect. This intellect would continue to develop under the communication with her father, although he was the one who really carried the conversations and she would just listen, for the most part. Still, he would have never imagined such a thing to be helping his daughter's enrichedness because he was one of those men who believe empathetically that a woman should hold no opinion which is not of masculine origin, and the maxims he had for his boys differed materially in many respects from those which he gave to his girls. But these precepts of his were, after all, only matches to Evadne which fired whole trains of reflection, and lighted her to conclusions quite other than those at which he had arrived himself. In this way, however, he became her principal instructor. That is from page 5. The knowledge Evadne acquired wasn't just from her father or their daily conversations, but through books as well. When asked to get a book from the attic so she could read to her siblings, a quote from page 21 says, "A plate first attracted her attention, and then she read a little to see what the plate meant, and then when she read a little more, because the subject fascinated her, and the lucid language of great scientific man, certain of his facts, satisfied her, and carried her on insensibly. She was fond of the Heavenly Twins, and had them often in her care. The Heavenly Twins would actually act a little bit mischievous, no matter the person, but under her care she had no ill feelings or bitterness towards them. She expressed signs of critical thinking, surprising anyone who were to be listening. In this particular situation, I have decided to use a line from page 36 from Mrs. Ortenbeg. "You seem to be very wide awake tonight, Evadne," Mrs. Ortenbeg rejoined. "This is the first I have heard of your peculiar views." Now, the general attitudes for middle-class Victorian girls were that they weren't that educated. If they were to be educated, they would need to make enough to provide for the governess. But even so, it was very limited for girls compared to boys who learned about more sciencey, maths, literature, things actually used apart from just entertainment, but used in their daily lives, and it helps them reach greater theories, greater assertions, compared to women who really only had their education consisting of arts and female skills, such as sewing or knitting. Manners that were expected of a good middle class girl were to be innocent and submissive. They weren't really encouraged to read much besides novels because novels are guided in instruction and they wouldn't have to really critically think to reach somewhere compared to also newspapers and other factual books that would increase the possibility of women or girls, as they were thought as the more sentimental sex, to have negative emotions or feelings when they cannot do anything about it, as the men are the ones who control things that happen in the newspaper and so forth. To her father, she was thought as a truly sensible girl with no nonsense of new-fangled notions about her. And to her mother, she prided herself most upon Evadne and as answering in every particular to the conventional idea of what a young lady should be. As a young lady, she grew and tended to other things besides and further from books. There's a statement here made in part of Vatuna which goes, theoretically people are cruel and unjust, but practically, to an attractive young lady of good social position and just out, their manners are most agreeable, and when Evadne returned to Gay after her first season in town, she thought less and sang more. Page 44. She was also proposed to by the priest, and although she rejected him, she began to yearn for a more romantic connection. She had a conversation with her mother that actually detailed the events that went by, and her mother, having already classified him as a man of good status and influence, was a little bit disappointed in the news. Still, this part of Ivani's life was when she most acted as a young lady was supposed to act and think. Marriage. Evadne began a relationship with Major Colquhoun that turned into a proposal. They rapidly began preparations for the wedding, and the whole ordeal only consisted about 2 months. This is not very uncommon because he was in the military, but apart from that, couples did not have the privilege most times to know each other for long and to be out together without making a decision. Still, she had mistaken passion for love, not to her knowledge, but she was happy and excited with her decision. Still, shortly after, she received a note warning her about Major Colquhoun, and she could not bring herself to love him once more. This note contained the fact that he had committed deeds that she did not find suitable for her and truly disgusting for a man to do outside of a marriage. But premarital sex was excused many times by men and even women of the time had a man been the one committing it. It was seen as unholy and a sin, but it was up to a woman to bring this man out, believe in him, and turn him into a better man. And that's what marriage was for, or at least an ideal of it. Still, the amount of premarital sex in the city and the use of prostitutes increased the risk of STDs and harmed many other people besides the carrier and the prostitutes, including the mothers who had to give birth already containing and being transmitted the disease. The general attitudes for middle class Victorian girls were that marriage was significant and an important step for a woman. She would go on to live with her husband, and they would be generally of the same class, an age gap not really being concerning to anyone as long as the woman was younger. Family was deeply involved in the process, and divorce was not just extremely difficult to get, but very looked down upon. The role of a wife was to be The role of a wife was to raise and care for their children as well as her husband and be the moral compass in their household. Had a man been bad, she was supposed to believe in him and with empathy and support turn him good. A woman was always supposed to become a wife. There was no other intended and good future for her, not being a career, not being anything else, than to become a wife. That was Victorian Lit, The Heavenly Twins, Evadne, Part 1.